Welcome, everyone. I'm Barbara Call, Senior Director of Content Operations and Strategy at IDG, and I'll be your host and moderator for today's webcast. Today we'll be talking about Storage as a Service, Keystone. I have two speakers with me today. First up is Kent Christensen, Cloud and Data Center Practice Director at Insight's Cloud and Data Center Transformation Organization. Welcome, Kent.
Thank you, Barbara. Great to be here.
Also with us today is Juan Orlandini, Chief Architect for Insight's Cloud and Data Center Transformation Solution. Welcome, Juan.
Hello, Barbara. Thank you for having us.
So now I'm going to hand things over to Kent and Juan to run through our presentation. Gentlemen, over to you.
So this is Juan, and I'd like to go through the agenda real quick. So today we're going to cover what is as a service. Make sure that we all have a base understanding of what we're talking about. Then we're going to dive into how NetApp Keystone offers storage as a service. We're going to cover some example engagements and how some clients have been able to achieve some pretty fascinating results, how these services are then delivered, and we're going to wrap it up with a summary and a Q&A session. So let me get started by discussing the difference between CapEx and OpEx and as a service versus cloud consumption. These are all financial models, or a way of making sure that your spend is matching your financial reality. And you look at this, the more traditional CapEx, that's where you buy stuff. So you buy it all up front. You pay for it. You might have to pay for maintenance as a separate charge, but that's managed differently. You pay for all of it, regardless of whether you're using all of it or just a little bit of it. So that means that you're typically paying a lot more for it up front. But over the longer term, it means that if you sweat your equity, you potentially could make significant savings. And it's not unusual to have a depreciation cycle of 3 years and now increasingly 5 years or more on assets that are purchased through CapEx. And if you need to do some refreshes, there's some programs that are like evergreen, and there's some other terminology associated with it that might prevent you from doing forklifts, whereas some of these other things are, as a service, the upgrade cycle is handled as part of the program itself. In OpEx spending, that's typically a lease. FASB rules come into place, and some of those rules actually make it so that your OpEx actually has to be reported similarly to your CapEx, because there's actually outlay that's associated with that spend. You need a minimum spend typically with the OpEx. There's typically also lower monthly costs, but that lower cost means that you can only flex up. And by flex up, I mean that you can only start spending more and more and more. You can never go back down. Because of the FASB rules, it could also affect your profit reporting. So some of our clients are preferring not to do OpEx, and they decide to do CapEx, or to go down to as a service or cloud consumption models. And if you look at this compared to a CapEx model, it is more expensive. There is a finance charge associated with it. As a service has a lower initial outlay because you have maybe a minimum or floor capacity that you have to purchase. But then after that, you have the ability to flex your spend up or down. So if you have a burst requirement or your needs go lower than what you needed in the prior month or prior year or whatever it is, you can actually flex down and lower your consumption rate. So it's fantastic for workloads that have variable needs, or where you actually don't know what your consumption model is going to be, and you need to have the flexibility of going up and down. All right. However, if you look at it over the long term, the spend on them is potentially significantly much higher. It could be a significant cost premium if you continue just to flex up and flex up and flex up, rather than having a seesaw kind of a spend model. The important part on this one, though, and the differentiator between an OpEx and as a service, is that it's not a lease. So it does not get reported the same way according to the FASB rules. And then the cloud consumption model, which is what we're typically see in something like a public cloud, so your AWS, Azures, GCPs, there is the lowest initial outlay. You colloquially say you swipe your credit card and buy only what you need. It has the most flexibility. It flexes up, flexes down, and if you're flexing up, it has infinite capacity. You you can never run out of cloud space, supposedly. You do have the ability to flex up and flex down. It could be the lowest pricing if it's managed properly, or you have very variable workloads. But it could also be, if you're not very careful about what you're doing, the highest pricing. And part of that is because there's an inbuilt premium to those services, but there's also a lot of hidden costs that you have to be intimately aware of. So ingress charges, egress charges, API call charges, in addition to the storage itself. So there's a trade-off that's associated with that. So with all that as a backdrop, why would you look at storage as a service? Typically, that's not something that we've done in the past. In the past, storage was a premium, so we tended to either buy it all up front and make sure that we consumed it, or you did it in the public cloud where it just flexed up, or you did what you did. But now as a service, you get a much clearer upfront pricing view. They know exactly how much is going to cost you, how much is going to pay for. You're going to pay for capacity or performance. You only pay for what you use. You can scale up or scale down. It's a great financial tool, as we discussed in the prior slide. There's literally no assets on your books, and flexible OpEx teams to avoid all those FASB lease rules. It's also potentially a bridge to the cloud strategy. So if you're having a transition from a more traditional operation model where you're mode 1, so to speak, this is a more mode 2-ish consumption model that can be part of your cloud native strategy, or it could be part of your way to rebalance your capacity as you're transitioning from one operating model to another. And it's also a way to reduce your risk from cloud and business uncertainty. We're living in a very uncertain times, and because of that, you now have the ability with this as a service model that if you need to flex up because you've developed a great new service that is being consumed in great value, then you can grow very rapidly and very quickly and pay for that. But if you're not, and you need to flex down for certain workloads or different workloads, you have the ability to do that. So great flexibility, and this is really what's piqued the interest of our clients. So Kent, you want to go over some of the market?
Yeah, thanks, Juan. And I think when we start to look at the market and why there's been really a fast uptake on this, two things. One, as this Gartner slide is indicating, and note that this prediction was done before the COVID outbreaks, et cetera. So they had already predicted that, for a number of reasons. One, I don't have to plan up front. I get to consume what I use or pay for what I use, et cetera. They had already predicted that up to 15% of new infrastructure purchased was going to go into a cloud-like consumption model. That number is significantly higher given the fact that we have new pressures. And I think two of the points on the previous slide, one was it's a bridge to cloud. So if we were to take, where are the customers looking at this right now? Number one, a lot of customers have a risk due to, I don't know how much of my data is going to be in cloud 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. So, and as a service gives them that flexibility to say, whether it's 10% or 30% 2 years from now, you have that flexibility. And the other, during this pandemic and after this pandemic is an uncertainty of the business model in general. I don't know if my business is going to flex up or flex down over the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and it gives them that flexibility. So those are some of the things we're seeing. The Gartner data supports that, why we didn't see it before, but its time has kind of come. So we can start the transition to, NetApp being a sponsor, Keystone being one of the services we're going to talk about. But if we step back and look at NetApp, they have a overarching strategy called the data fabric. And the data fabric essentially means that instead of just selling on-premise storage devices, which is what NetApp grew up for and with, and why, most people think of NetApp when they hear that name, they think of on-premise, enterprise-grade storage, et cetera. What they've done is years ago, they started saying, it doesn't matter where you run the management software we have, we want to be a data management company. And in order to do that across on-premise, hybrid, and cloud, they created what's called the data fabric, which is running their data management software in any and all of those environments. And so we're going to transition to a little bit about Keystone, which is how to consume them on-premise, but note that they have parallel products called Cloud Data ONTAP, Cloud Volumes, Azure NetApp Files, which are actually native cloud services as well as a number of hybrid solutions. So with that, a transition into NetApp Keystone. And with the previous slide, you kind of understand why. I can go to a cloud provider, whether that be AWS, Google, or Azure, and consume either in a marketplace or as a first-party service. So I'm actually purchasing Azure NetApp Files from Microsoft itself. I'm not transacting with NetApp to do that. And I'm consuming NetApp's data management strategy there. And clearly, they needed a similar approach. I can't take the same on-premise approach of saying I can consume only via CapEx or only via lease. And so what Keystone is a bridge to that. I'm giving you an on-premise consumption of a cloud-like service. So I'm giving you a cloud-like consumption model, and we'll get into the details so that I can consume similar to cloud, although my data may still be on-premise today. And by proxy, that has given me a bridge to cloud. So Juan, why don't you talk a little bit about how you can consume that?
So Keystone pricing benefits is what we talked about in the previous slides, right? You pay based on performance tiers. And we'll cover those performance tiers. They're very similar to what you would see in the public clouds. So it's based on whether you want extreme performance or lower performance, but more capacity for the same dollar. The other thing that you end up getting is a pay-per-use model, where you have a base committed capacity, but you also have a burst pricing. So as your workloads flex up, you pay for that extra burst. But then as it goes down, you stop paying for that extra burst, and then you go. That dollar per terabyte that you're paying for includes all of the hardware. So we put the hardware on the premises. It includes all the core OS functionality, which traditionally you would have had to license separately. And it includes the support aspects of the licensing as well. So you get all of that bundled in on a per terabyte model, so you know exactly what you're getting for. There's some flexible terms associated with it. There's a minimum 100 terabyte per site requirement, and it's for 1 year. So and that's in today's world, 100 terabytes is relatively small. So you can start really, really small, and then you can grow as large as you would want to grow. And what's nice is with Insight, we can help you manage it. So we'll cover our managed services in a little while. But if you also want to get out of the model of managing the storage and truly consuming it, we can do that for you as well. And as well as supporting it and all the aspects associated with that. So with a single pricing model, you get the capacity, the performance that you need, the features and functionality that you need, very flexible terms, and optionally the ability to have it just be truly consumed. Just either allocate storage and you consume it in a traditional mode, or it's an API call away where you can allocate and be provisioned in a more cloud-native consumption model. So those tiers that we talked about, and Kent, I'll ask you to step in here in a second, is really very similar to what you would see in one of the public clouds. So if you look on the right-hand side, you have Azure that's got the Ultra Premium Standard, GCP's got Standard Premium Extreme. NetApp Keystone has similar terminology. There's some additional numbers that we haven't included in here in terms of performance and guarantees and capacity and all that. But it would be safe to bet that the Keystone performance is at least as good, if not better, than what you would get in the public cloud. You have dedicated hardware that's associated with your infrastructure, and based on your performance tier, you should get fantastic performance at throughput that is also at least as good, if not better, than what you would get in the public cloud. So that takes that aspect of designing and architecting your infrastructure out of the equation. You have the three models, you pick what performance, you create those service levels internally, and you provision them, and you get them. And that's a great story, both internally and from an operational perspective.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, while it's a complicated slide, the concept is similar, and you can start to see, I'm able to consume in the same pricing categories and buckets, if you would, standard, premium, extreme, on premises as I can in cloud. And while we can design, as Juan's pointing out, we could spend an hour of going through all the details of performance levels, et cetera. That's left to the design. But you are starting to see how I can get on-premise capabilities that align to their cousins in the cloud, which provides a great transition into the services side. So when you consume a service, maybe it's one of its cousins would be Cloud Volumes or Azure NetApp Files in the cloud, you don't have a lot of flexibility to tweak knobs and do a lot of management. Like most cloud workloads, you kind of provision it and you go and you run. And Keystone is designed to give you a completely operated white glove experience just like that. However, since we are seeing that most of the people consuming Keystone today are getting ready for cloud or looking at the flexibility it provides, but they're still used to running reports or putting application workloads on resources, et cetera. And so there's a model called client operated, which says, you know what, we're going to take care of all the monitoring for you, the billing things, the infrastructure will be there for you as you need it, as you grow, et cetera. But if you'd like to do, some of the reporting and administration of that resource, because there is actually a physical resource sitting in your data center that is providing the resource for you, you can operate that as you do, and over time, you can start to transition some of those services off onto the managed services, which is, how we deliver this is essentially a layered approach to managed services from you operate what you do to you don't worry about anything and you just consume it like it was in cloud. So with that, I think I'd like to give you a couple of examples and hopefully these hit home. They're not public and you'll see why. One's a financial organization, and anybody who's tried to get a financial organization to say, can you go public? It doesn't happen very often. But this is similar to a lot in that first category where they're trying to balance a cloud strategy. So in this case, the financial organization, created a well over $100 million commitment to multiple cloud providers. So what they're looking at is, hey, we love the NetApp technology, but we're going to cloud. In this case, it was a combination of AWS and Google, et cetera. There is a goal, if you would, that we're going to close one of our 4 data centers in the next year and then progress from there. But anybody looking at that doesn't have a tremendous amount of visibility of will we get to that goal, how much of the data will be in the cloud, how much won't be, et cetera. No problem. We introduced NetApp Keystone, which says, okay, you've got, petabytes of NetApp on-prem today. So let's say you have 10 to start, and let's say you expect 6 months from now to have 1 petabyte in the cloud, not a problem. While Keystone is focused on the on-premise capability, what Insight can do is combine that with its cousin, let's say it's AWS Cloud Volumes, and say, okay, you're going to consume 9 petabytes of Keystone, 1 petabyte of Cloud Volumes, no problem. If 6 months later you move another petabyte out to the cloud, no problem, we'll help you balance that. What Keystone was doing was providing the private version of that which will run in your data center. And then what Insight was doing was combining that with public cloud and giving you that flexibility to rotate, et cetera. So of course, given the strategy they had, I want to maintain my NetApp footprint and my data management strategy. This is awesome. And ultimately, they asked us to start looking at where else can you do this where we didn't have NetApp. We had some block stuff, we have some networking things, we have some compute things. And so it was actually a perfect fit for that type of organization that is trying to get some unknown transition to a cloud strategy. The second organization certainly is actually not looking at public cloud as an opportunity. It's a federal agency. Again, name will be withheld. In this case, they had a NetApp footprint and they needed to do a refresh. As you've probably noticed, federal budgets are in no need of cash, but they do have budgets. And so in this case, they said, I've got X amount of money in this year's budget, but what I really want to do is stay on line with my transformational goals. I really want to transform everything into an all-flash infrastructure and help me with my infrastructure transformation. And that doesn't fit in my budget for this year. What can you do? And so we went in and we said, well, would something like Keystone work? And certainly the 1 year of Keystone fit well within their budgeted allocation for this. But they found another opportunity. While the federal organizations are no shortage of cash and actually more coming in, they have uncertainty in their business cycle as well. Is my budget going to go up? Is my budget going to decrease? Are we going to have new initiatives for a number of reasons? Our initiative is going to go into another group. And so they saw the flexibility as a no-brainer. I think as Juan articulated in the beginning, if you purchase this for 3 years of Keystone, if you would, and compare that to a CapEx, you're going to be reasonably close. But as you say, well, what if I sweat my assets for 5 years? You're going to actually pay significantly more to have the flexibility. And in this case, they looked at that and they said, well, the flexibility that this has given me far outweighs the fact that I may actually have saved money if I use the same things for 5 years. So, and anybody who's dealt with federal organizations, they didn't wait till the October budgeting cycle, et cetera. They actually went to RFQ, which is give me the price inside of 4 weeks, which, again, anybody who's worked with federal organizations, that's light speed. So, Juan, did you want to cover some of the support models we have in managed services?
Sure. So we have 3 levels of support. And there's just layered capabilities that you add on top of each other. So there's the essential services level, which is configuration management, performance reporting, and billing monitoring. That helps you day-to-day operational, but it doesn't include things like patch management, incident management. We include those as part of the advanced services, and that includes unlimited technical support, 24/7, incident and problem resolution, and as potentially, if we want to expand it beyond just Keystone and into servers and operating systems and all that, OS and common application patching can be included in that as well. All right. And then the Premier Services includes everything that was in advance, but it's continuity management is included, capacity planning, infrastructure assessments and reviews, and what I kind of touched on it, but what I really like is the capacity management that helps you really understand what is your trend lines, how are you moving, whether you need to consider additional resources beyond just the storage that's included in Keystone. It could be anything from servers, storage, compute, networks, all those different things. The value in this is pick your level of engagement with us. We're happy to service with you across any of these different tiers.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's important is sometimes when people hear managed services, they assume a completely different operational model. And what the essential services is doing is saying, we can help you with your monitoring, billing, and things like that. And you can still do what we call client operated as an entry point, and then you can grow into some of the other services.
That's exactly right. So the organization that does this, we call that OneCall, and it includes our managed services team as well. It's a very large organization that's been around for a long time. We have well over 1,000 customers, over 3,300 arrays. We manage over 1,500 incidents per month. Of the clients that have chosen Veritas from us as an example, 85% of them have chosen to do that. 65% of our NetApp clients have chosen to do that. And one of the values that's not captured in this is that if you go down to OneCall Managed Services, well over 80% of the time when you call into us for a ticket, if you happen to call into us, we respond and close the call on the very first call. So it's a one calls, kind of a play on words. But well over 95% of the calls do not need escalation to the manufacturer, which is means that our troubleshooting resolution is significantly simplified, because we have experts across all things in data center. So networking, compute, the hypervisor layers, the security layers, all those things that could potentially be impacting aspects of the operations. Our clients, on top of that, span worldwide locations. We have 600 plus managed services clients alone. We have well over 100,000 infrastructure components that are monitored. And the way we do that is not by staffing up a whole bunch of people. We have a great amount of automation that we built into the environment so that we can manage this efficiently for you. That means that we can service over 20,000 service requests a year, with a greatly skilled staff, but it's not an extensive staff in terms of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. The automation handles a lot of that, and that's part of the value that we bring to the table. An interesting tidbit is that we do have clients on 6 continents, which is kind of interesting. We're holding out for that one last continent, but Antarctica's internet is kind of hard to get to. And the other thing that you should be aware of is we have 5 resilient U.S. Remote support centers. So it's all based in the U.S. It's scattered across all 4 time zones in the U.S. and the 24/7 model that we offer spans across those different locations. They're also set up to be highly available to each other. So in case you have a geographically or a incident that's geographically centered, it does not affect our operations in any way.
Yeah, I think if I added one more point on this, that's showing kind of the breadth and scale of our ability to deliver services, but it does bring another dimension. If it wasn't clear, Keystone is focused on storage, and many of our clients need storage. It's very critical. Our data is important, but they also potentially need things to go with it. They might want it hosted. They might want to combine it, as we talked a little bit about, with cloud. They may need compute, network, security, backup. And a lot of those are additional services that we can wrap into a single go-to-market around that. So the breadth of our managed services, being able to deliver not just one service, but essentially a menu of services to meet an end goal for the client is incredibly important. And so, Juan, I think what I can do is just cover a little bit on what the billing model looks like. You know, and these are just some of the details, and we can get into with any questions, et cetera. But it's based on an effective capacity model. So if you're used to the efficiency you might have gotten from running a NetApp environment on the premises, all cloud is effective. In other words, if your application needs a terabyte of data, you're going to pay for a terabyte of data, whether that's in a cloud or a Keystone model, so you can see that aligning up. And then there's some details on, I don't know if you want to go into some of the other technical details on the pricing.
No, I just want to reiterate what you said, which is when you do a CapEx purchase of NetApp or any other storage in a traditional mode, you're buying a certain amount of spinning media or flash media or solid state media of some sort. And then you're hoping that there is an effective utilization that is higher than that because of dedupe and compression, maybe some other technologies associated with that. In this model, you got to disassociate yourself from that. You're paying a per terabyte fee. So if you write 100 terabytes worth of data, you pay for the 100 terabytes, and you do not worry about the storage that's underneath it, whether it's getting a 2-to-1, a 1-to-1, it doesn't matter. Right, you pay for that consumption, and that's the billing metric. So there's no variability on it, and that's a big important part of it. Right. I mentioned earlier that there's a burst capacity up to 20% that's included in the program, but if you have higher variability than that, that's something that the program can accommodate as well. And you know, it's the final point on here is also very important, is that the billing is done in arrears. So you don't get metered by the second. There's a monitoring tool that's part of the program that monitors how much consumption you've had, including the bursts or the lulls. And then you get a monthly bill at the tail end that bills you according to that. And correct me if I'm wrong, Kent, but it can be done other than monthly, right? It could be done quarterly.
Yeah, no, it's quarterly. We have one annual, so there is some flexibility to the billing to fit your model.
Well, with that, I think we should transition over to any questions. Barbara, was there any questions out there?
Yeah, so I guess in closing, what I would ask is, why would it be beneficial for someone to look at this as a service model? Kent, why don't you go first with that?
Well, I think as Juan pointed out, you know, technically, if I just compared a 5-year consumption of a known quantity, i.e., I need 500 terabytes and I'm going to need that exact amount for 5 years, you will pay more for as a service. Where we're seeing the rapid, you know, interest in this is the flexibility. I don't know how much of that data is going to be in the cloud. And realistically, most organizations, they can guess and they can have a target, but they really don't know. And this gives you a lot of flexibility. And if it's over a 3-year period, if it was a 30% premium, let's just say to go, over a 4-year period, if it was a 30% premium to do an as a service versus a CapEx, it's well worth it to give you that flexibility. And then the other point we've said is the flexibility in our business model. We've had some events in the first half of 2020 that's given a lot of organizations, federal organizations, enterprise organizations, a little bit of a lack of clarity. Are we growing? Are we shrinking? It kind of goes week to week. And this is a lot of essentially de-risking the business for a very expensive asset, which is storage.
Juan, what are your thoughts here?
As usual, Kent is right, but I'd like to add a slightly different flavor to it as well. So one of the interesting things that we're seeing is that because of the events that are happening, some priorities in an organization might have been shifted. So some programs that might have been kind of petering along and didn't have a lot of emphasis might be suddenly accelerated. Some that were running full speed might need to be decelerated just because of the financial reality we are and the change in the nature of how we work and how we interact with each other as well as other organizations. And by that, I mean things like digital transformation initiatives. We're seeing huge amounts of peaked interest and acceleration of digital transformation. And this financial model lets you flex where you invest your spend by maybe slowing down the consumption for one kind of project and accelerating it for another. And some of those programs are a little bit of an experiment. You don't know exactly how you're going to digitally transform because things are so variable in the market right now. So you might be able to accelerate one, decelerate another, or try several and see which one really is the one that's going to serve your business the best. And then the others can flex back down. And this is a great way to have flexibility across all of that and be able to help you be more nimble in your approach to addressing the changing times we live in today.
Thank you, gentlemen. That was great. Thank you to my guests, Ken Christensen of Insight and Juan Orlandini, also of Insight. For additional information on this topic, please visit the resources section on your screen. And if you have any additional questions, please use the question widget on the screen and someone will get back to you as soon as possible. And thanks for joining us. For IDG and Insight, I'm Barbara Call.